you. Both of them are really experts in not just sustainability, but that covers the historic preservation, Lawrence Historic Preservation, and I'm fascinated by some of the work she does because it's on mortar. You're going to get tired when you say that.
I love mortar.
But
My dissertation was on mortar.
It's awesome, just awesome. So I'm going to let them go ahead and get started because I want you to be able to ask questions, because I will.
So, thanks for that fantastic introduction. I have no idea how many people we'll be talking to, so here's what this is. It's just a series of thoughts on slides that maybe provide some perspective.
But I was trying to do just this one line.
Oh.
Well, you can turn them off right now. I don't know. We're not going to be
Okay.
blind in the dark.
No, I'm scared. There we go.
All right.
It's a matinee. These are just a whole bunch of thoughts. And we weren't sure how today would go, whether it was a formal 2 hours or not. But we thought, and you know, really you've been around schools and school environments and the teaching thing almost on a day-to-day basis, much more than we have. So the expertise actually is on this side of the projector rather than this side. So we thought we'd touch on some of these issues regarding disengaged children and curriculum development focused on learning versus teaching. I mean, what are the children actually going to learn? We have a kind of a large problem in that conformity is a major issue, both in teaching and in learning, but all kids are different. And you know from those things that Ken Robinson talks about in this whole, you know, are we actually, you know, reducing creativity in schools by forcing kids into a single shape, where in fact they're all very different. So we want to touch schools as community resources and other topics, which are your topics too. So that's what we thought about. As Nancy said, what are we bringing to the experience? Well, to the table, business and academic experience covering a number of different areas, and something called design thinking. It's not about designing a product, although it can be. It's about thinking differently about how a process works, or how a system works, or how an educational system works, and also how buildings work too. So we're not here to advocate for building something new or retrofitting it. As my professor in professional practice in London, after we'd done our 7 years of architecture education, said to us, remember guys, you're about to get your professional practice license, but the most important advice you're ever likely to give to any client is don't build anything. Your job is not to build a building as a symptom, to treat a symptom of a problem. Is to understand a fundamental problem, and a building may not be the answer, even though you're carrying that title architect. So again, we're not here to advocate for that. So we thought, just as a warm-up, we'd look at some city and neighborhood development things that have sort of brought us to where we are today. And again, this is just our perspectives. Zoning and its impacts, and also the consequences of treating things that we call human habitats. These are places that we design and build for a whole range of different things. But we have a tendency today to treat them as real estate commodities. Build them on the cheap, flip them as fast as possible, and make sure the bankers and real estate investment trusts get as much money as possible. The rest of us are now stuck with that. It's a real problem, and it happens in schools. It even happens in the charter schools. I'm involved in a couple of charter school initiatives over in the West Valley, and they're stuck with exactly the same dynamics from the banking fraternity. Build it on the cheap. They don't care anything about the cost of occupancy or the need to build in flexibility for future, you know, for the future at all. Is this clear for you?
Yeah.
It is. Very well.
Really bad.
Yeah. So as I said, our view of habitat is that it sits in the middle of a lot of different things: community, energy, climate, health, education, and economy. You can put any one of these in the middle, but habitat's always there somewhere. It's the places that actually shape so much of who we are. And how did we get here? Robert Crumb, you know, the cartoonist, well, this is one of his cleaner set of cartoons. Here we see a sort of pristine place, probably in the 1870s, with the railways coming along and then a tiny settlement. We see some technology coming along with the telegraph and telephone, a little bit more industrial development going on. So this little farmhouse with a picket fence has turned into a corner something or other with a bigger tree. And then along came the trams, the trolleys, street lighting, centralized grid power, and we end up with streets looking a little bit more familiar as they are today. And then here we are in the automobile age, and I would venture to say that this intersection here is almost the same as 44th and Thomas. It isn't designed or built at all for human beings, at all. And yet, everything here perfectly meets all of the zoning requirements and planning requirements that the cities impose. But it's got nothing to do with people.
And before we go on, I have to point out that he mentioned that little house up in the corner. It's still in the top screen right there, but now it's gone. So they're in our history.
Yeah, no one understood. That's a good point. Yeah, it's a parking lot now.
And then fast food.
Yeah. One other quick thing. There's a great book came out a few years ago called Sunday Afternoon on the Porch. And this chap, Everett W. Kuntz, was a young boy in the late 1930s, early 1940s in Iowa, who spent all of his paper route money buying a camera. And he shot photographs of the world around him. But he could never afford to process the photographs. He wasn't of a lot of means, but his family found the photographs, the negatives, and published this series of photographs in this book. And what struck me about this is that, is it to do with schools? No, it's a lot to do with community. Places where there's obviously a public area, places where there's a sort of transition area to that front porch. People are actually smiling. And what truly bothers us, Lauren, myself, and everyone else in that group, is that we exchange that for this. And that also is Sunday afternoon. It's actually in Frisco, in North Dallas. And there isn't a sidewalk inside. There's not a front porch inside. There's the 15-foot entrances in case those tall people come for dinner. But all the roofs state that money can buy, but there's nobody there. And that cascades all the way through to the way we locate and design schools, the way we put programs into them, and the general thinking around it. And it is time, I think, for some pretty massive changes in thinking.
It doesn't encourage children on the street either.
No. And if they are on the street, it's a racetrack rather than a regular street. Two cities on pretty much the same climate. This is Scottsdale at Thompson Peak and Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. This is zoning as we know it today. Oversubscribed with parking lots, put all the blacktop in. And this city here is Barcelona. Same population, about 4.5 million. Very, very similar climate. In fact, it's more brutal in the summer because it's more humid. They don't have these zoning codes. They, in fact, have more cars per capita than we do. And yet they are doing something with their land that's a lot different. These places are cool, shaded courtyards. We don't have them. And the thinking behind that, the only purpose of saying this, is that the approach to planning schools and locating them and all of the zoning that goes on is no different than what we see here. And it can be different. And it's certainly not oriented toward children and teachers as far as I can see. Quick quote here from Christopher Alexander. He wrote a book called Pattern Language in the late 1960s. And he's an architect and a mathematician. And his work on the pattern language actually defined exactly how today computer programmers build their code for the web and everywhere else. It came, oddly enough, from looking at the places we inhabit. But the quote I thought was rather interesting. He says, if children are not able to explore the whole of the adult world around them, they cannot become adults. Kids are not able to explore anything these days to speak of. If they do, it's usually at the wrong end of the legal spectrum. But the normal exploration of environments is almost impossible because of how we've zoned, because of how we locate schools, and because of how we size them. We've all gone way beyond the one-room schoolroom there, and the 21st century classroom obviously is technologically rich, or at least potentially so. So there are huge numbers of things that you know about as well as I do that really impact things like what you can do with existing schools, what you can do with what you should be doing with new ones, how teachers and students interact. And as you mentioned, Ken Robinson, as he says, if school programs and school curriculums are designed to give 7- and 8-year-olds low-level clerical tasks to do while they're in class, it's no wonder they fidget. They're going to get bored very, very quickly. We have bored a colleague pup, and he gets bored in 2 minutes. So doing the same thing isn't going to work. And we, unfortunately, we then say our kids have actually got a clinical problem. But that problem may in fact come from the curriculum and the environment that they're in. Obviously, school meals are improving, but we still have a large number of schools that think that these things are okay. They're not. They're absolutely not.
Well, you can fill them with healthy things, but they generally doesn't happen. We see Pizza Hut in the lunchroom.
Yeah. Or we could go from that to edible schoolyards. We already have great examples. The Sing Farm down on Thomas demonstrates that we can in fact grow a huge variety of things in this climate if it's done right. And there's no reason why schools and all the land they have outside of the sports fields can't be turned over to something else. And this is a school roof. So you can actually use the building to do that. Why is this important? Well, all of this soil, even though it's heavy, can actually provide a fantastic amount of insulation for the schoolrooms beneath it. Right? So these kind of things are possible. Again, moving from there, I'm not suggesting we have any schools like this within Scottsdale, although that does remind me of the school I went to in England, except it was full of kids, 41 of us actually in a class. To much more of a mentoring environment. If you talk to educators, they speak a lot about the need for greater mentoring. Teachers get it, but they're also heavily regulated to conform to teaching to the test, which doesn't necessarily do our kids much good. Standardized tests have their role, but maybe not as the core of a course. I'm not sure if you remember, but Herman Miller, the furniture maker, they make all those great ergonomic chairs. They have a learning spaces research project, and they've been doing a lot of work up in Holland, Michigan, in their research labs, looking at different school environments and trying to come up with ways of lighting and furnishing schools in very simple ways to enable these places to become environments where kids can interact, they feel engaged, and so on. There's nothing expensive about any of this, it's just thinking it through differently, that's all. It's another example of part of their program here. This is also another example. I think the school's actually in New York, where you've got both classroom, but you've also got workspace outside. I'm not sure if we have this in our schools right now. I suspect we don't. But it would be interesting to get some innovative educators and teachers to participate in shaping environments that could be better. Schools too tend to be kind of locked up after hours, but they used to be kind of community resources, and there's no reason why they can't, whether it's for music or for hobbies or for kids to come back and do work after school hours because they want to do things. I know when I was growing up, there was a science club in the school I went to, and we actually had a small radiation lab where we actually make an atomic bomb if we wanted. But there were science clubs and everything else like that. But adults participated. There were some physicists from the local university that participated as well. So it wasn't locked up. It was part of the community. And in the modern day science lab, this may exist already in the Scottsdale schools, I don't know. But the need for more working, no? Well, you
We have a modular building.
A modular building.
Yeah. We have a modular building with a few folding tables.
Our kids, and actually, given the problems that are building up over the next 70 years, we need as much innovative thinking and learning as possible if we're going to innovate our way out of this. And so modular buildings with all the limitations that they have, I don't think are the answer.
I can't speak for the whole district, but are there any buildings in the district that have any approach like this at all?
Not that I know of.
In the K5, K8 area?
Ain't no
I've heard,
CB's closest.
I've heard some rumors, well, talking about different ones up north that have it, and Copper Ridge is trying to fall into that pattern. And,
Oh, Copper Ridge is a prison.
yeah,
My
but-
kids went to Copper Ridge. The rooms are like this. There's no windows. There's a square block. You
Yeah.
have 8 classrooms, 4 on top of each other, 2 floors.
Some of
It
those,
looks like a prison building.
Yeah.
they are trying to
It's a
change
horrible,
the
it's a horrible
environment.
architectural design.
Who designed that, Peterson? Or did he?
No.
He was behind it.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't even here.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the
It was
district
built in
at
the
the
late 90s. It was-
When, in 2002, the school district decided they needed to
Somebody settled on it, I don't know.
remodel the science building at Cornell High School. And they shut the whole building down. And for a year, they remodeled it, and when they opened it, the assistant principal asked me to come up, and I didn't have kids in school anymore, and I was doing other stuff. And he said, can you come up and just go through the building with me and the principal? And I said, yeah, sure. So I went up, and they showed me what had happened. We built science, chemistry and science rooms that couldn't be used. Because according to OSHA and state law, you have to have certain things. We had electrical wiring running over open water drains. We had,
How did that happen?
because they're not big.
They went on the cheap.
Yes.
Supai,
exactly.
I know for a fact Supai has science rooms like was in that slide, but except for the overhead vents and everything. My son goes to a class like that. That obviously doesn't have the big glass wall on the side, which would be wonderful if they did. But yeah, they've got stuff like that now, just not as nice.
Well, I know that folks in the clinical area, as part of my background is in public health, but I know in the clinical area that plenty of research has been done in the impact of daylight on learning. I mean, testing scores go up at least 20% if kids are exposed to daylight in their classes, that, as opposed to fluorescent lights inside of a darkened room. I mean, any human being is going to underperform in a place like
There's
that.
not a classroom in Copper Ridge with a window.
Well, then you don't have to worry about drive-by shootings, do you?
Well, actually, I asked the question, just backing up on the sort of money side of it. This was actually out on the West Valley with a large school there. And met with the investment banker group, it was from Chase. And I said, well, this is what the teachers are talking about. The teachers were there with me as well. And he said, well, whatever you do, he said, we don't fund anything more than $103 a square foot. And I said, why is that? He said, well, because that's the standard. I said, well, if $103 a square foot doesn't work.
We don't build anything except for $200 a foot.
Right.
Every structure we put up in this district, we spend almost exactly $200 a foot. It's almost like an automatic. Here's $200, give me a building.
Right.
So it's not as though our construction costs
No.
have been inadequate. It is a function of the vision and the use of the funding that has been available.
And it's also the fees that the bankers pull.
Yeah, in this particular instance, in this total project, they said we won't fund construction. The total project was around $220 a square foot, but it was for the construction piece of it, standing the building up was about 103.
No, we're 200 just for the structure.
Yeah.
We're not counting land, we're not counting prep work, just the structure, the building itself. If we put a building up in this district, we spend $200. And I sat through a discussion about that, and I was told that we built, I'm trying to remember the terminology. We funded the project and built within the budget and built as much as we could build, and we basically just said, here's how much money you can have, create something. And we got back stuff
Well,
from, and I'm struggling because I can't remember. I'm trying to think of a building a K-12, K-5, K-8 building. I haven't been in ANLC or Yavapai. What do they look like? Were they different? Or they-
ANLC used to be Kiva School.
Right.
And it was redone. I don't know, I can tell you one that was not K through 8, but this high school at Coronado, that's pretty much the way they did it at Coronado. They said, here's the money we've got, go build stuff.
what I heard from the investment bank in this particular case was that, one, they said 103 at that particular time, a few years ago. But I said, right now, at $103 a square foot, the burden of the operating costs for things like running the HVAC and everything else, the electric, keeping the lights on and everything, is twice the cost of the mortgage on the building. The bankers didn't give a rip. I said, well, that doesn't matter. And this is right at the time when there were things called mortgage defaults happening.
Yep.
So bringing that sort of budgetary end along to address the issue of the cost of occupancy. I mean, if it's costing an arm and a leg to pay the utility bills, you're actually taking money away from either a teacher's salary or teacher's assistants or some other
For
facilities.
lab equipment?
Or lab equipment, yeah.
Well, as I look at the structures that are in our district today, a typical K-5 in our district is an 80,000 square foot structure. Some of them are 68,000. There's 68, 70, 80,000 square feet. And as we listen to the Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee come back out, as we look at the budgets, they're talking about $25 million per campus to rebuild.
How can that be? Would they not take I mean, this school here could be a little bit different needs than this school here or this one here. I mean, don't they go, according to that, it's just one plan fits all?
Well,
I can
look
answer
at
that.
these dollar amounts that are being set aside right now as just proposed discussion amounts. We're going to spend X dollars to rebuild Y school. You tend to see $25 million for one of those buildings, right?
Yes and no. With what was discussed in the Blue Ribbon Committee,
Right?
and there were generalized numbers that came up that said it's going to cost this much to rebuild Hohokam, this much to rebuild Kiva,
Right.
this much for Navajo. Navajo is definitely more on the expensive side because of all the asbestos remediation that has to be done. So there's a bunch of different numbers floating around, but those were estimates. Those weren't anything but quick estimates for the committee. The committee never said any exact numbers or anything like that. We never said we're going to put this much money into this school, this much into this one. We never said this school is going to look like this, which looks like this, which looks like this.
Right.
The entire thing on the Blue Ribbon Committee that came up, and we just gave our final presentation to the board on this the other day, and I was the one doing the presentation on it with Steve Kaporis. We recommended pretty much what the principals recommended, where they want spaces like this. They want the open pods. They want courtyards to go into, kind of like the Hohokam. When they were describing courtyards, I was looking at Hohokam. That was it. They want movable walls. They want the different features to go into this. And when you look at the buildings that we have right now and the conditions that they are, basing it all on Tonalea, going from Tonalea, Kiva is going to be shut down, Hopi is going to be shut down, Hohokam. Most of the schools that are 50, 60 years old are going to be shut down unless we do something about it. So we came up with some recommendations. We came up with some ideas. A lot of it was, like I said, like this, but nothing has been nailed down. Nothing has been set in stone. It's just a saying, this is what we need to do. And the first step is going for the bond.
Okay, here's my question, Mike. Nancy and I, as you know, we went to a lot of the meetings. We weren't allowed to talk, weren't allowed to get involved, but we were there listening.
And the lights
No.
went out because of it.
Everything that was on RAC was under what Dr. Peterson wanted. Okay, well then he left. Sorry, one of
Little warning.
my sunglasses. and he left, but the Blue Ribbon Committee continued on. Now, what about Dr. Birdwell? Is this what she's looking at too, or was that followed through on what Peterson was kind of pushing and looking for, or?
To be honest, what Peterson was looking for and what he wanted to do wasn't really talked about. We never said, he never came out and said, this is what I want to do, discuss this topic, do this right there. He never said that. He left it up to the business people, the parents, the teachers, the administrators. We all came together and said, this is what we would like to see. And Steve did a great job putting it all together, but we went off topic of what they were talking about a bunch of times. So it wasn't really any kind of recommendations about what Peterson wanted. This was about, do we go for the bond? This was about, do we step forward and put this out for our kids?
Right.
The architectural planning, the styles of the buildings, the community centers that would be involved with it, that all comes after we get a bond.
Is that an HDMI?
So once the process goes through,
Is that
say,
HDMI?
they put it out there to say, yes, we're gonna go for a bond, they'll have estimates of what the bond is going to be. And then they'll work within those things. But they're also going to have community meetings with the areas, like for Tonellia, they'll have a meeting with the Tonellia area. What would you like to see in your school? What would you like it to look like? Here are our proposed ideas. This is what we want to talk to you about. It's the same for Hohokam and things like that. And everybody has their own ideas about what the school should look
Yeah,
like.
I'm kind of curious because Dr. Burwell has been doing a lot of walking through different schools, and she's coming up with a lot of different strategies. We had a nice talk with her for a couple hours. We're going to meet with her again, so I'm just curious on what her thoughts are compared to what.
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I know
Because-
nobody does.
Well, and it's also, she is an interim superintendent. They have not given her a
Yeah, she hasn't got 90 days on the
contract
job.
to do, right? But I mean, and to be honest, she's the only one that's been in consideration for a while, which I don't believe is right. We should do a nationwide net to say, who are the people out there, what do they like, what can they do? But that's a different topic.
This is the only document that I've seen. Is this still active or is this outdated? And I misspoke. I said 25 million. I was wrong. So, but we're looking at 10 million to 15 million for the rebuilds.
Yeah.
And if we look at Hopi, just pick Hopi as an example, 15 million.
Those are about,
And Hopi is a 61,000 square foot building. Too.
if we base it off the last elementary school that was done, which was Yavapai, that was a hybrid build where they kept a lot of the building structure and remodeled it, and they were right around 12 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that was so many years ago. But
I think one of the things that came across to me in some of the budgets was what wasn't discussed. For example, you come up with a budget that says 150 million here or 20 million there, but there's no discussion about how those places are going to support a set of teaching methodologies that will impose different things on those spaces. So for me, the school building itself is not a question of how it should look, it's how it actually supports a teaching and education and mentoring and public use and community use program. And what I worry about is that you go for a bond that says, well, we're going to go for a bond for $130 million or whatever it is. Then it gets turned over to Tom, Dick, and Harry architects to do whatever they're doing, and they're not connected to the educational process. It's a bit like asking Tesla to build Tesla cars in an old Model T plant. It won't happen.
and that's one of the considerations that we had on the committee, and it's brought up numerous times. The way that they used to build schools is outdated already. We know that. We can't just go in with the new charters. They're built on a penny budget.
Yeah.
They're built tremendously shoddy.
Yeah.
We want something that will last for another 50 years. We want something that is sustainable with the grounds, with the building materials, with the mind of recycling, upcycling, everything like that. But then you also have to talk to the teachers and say, this is what we would like. If you're gonna build a pod for kindergarten, figure you've got 4 teachers and you're also gonna have a centralized work area. You want the lighting, you want everything that you've seen in those pictures. And it is attainable.
Yeah.
It is very attainable. But then you're going to have your district that steps in and says, well, we want it this way, we want it that way, you know, this is for this, and we gotta count the pennies. So there's a lot of hands and minds that go into the pot, and I understand that. I used to design houses, I worked with architects, I built houses, built buildings, and I understand that completely, that what is right sometimes isn't what happens.
Right.
So, but the overwhelming feeling in the district is that teachers will have the input. The administration of the schools will have the input, the neighborhoods will have the input, and there will be neighborhood community centers in the schools. Separate, so you don't have to go sign in the office.
Absolutely.
Separate, so you can hold functions there, like the
Right.
PTOs and PTAs can go in and do their things.
Meetings like this.
People can have meetings like this, you can rent the rooms. You know, you don't have to have the interaction with the kids, you don't have to go sign on and everything like that, so.
Right.
Those thoughts are out there, they are being kicked around for the schools. The administration wants it, the teachers want it, and now we just have to make sure that the architects understand
And we need
that.
to make sure the community understands what they want and why they
Right.
want it.
And-
And this is one of the reasons why I need to understand. I'm already being asked, well, I'm not gonna pass the bond. I'm not gonna approve a
Like I
bond.
said, last Thursday, we put our final presentation to the board. It went swimmingly well. It was received by 3 of the 4 that were there that were very, very receptive, saying, we know what we need to do. So,
Now we have
just
to
that,
hold them
it's
to-
the next step, what is going to happen in the
With
next
that
step.
being said, in fact, at the first board meeting, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna suggest strongly that this board give this superintendent interim some more time. Let's see what she can do. Give her some time. As it stands now, what, July, she's out of here?
Possibly.
Possibly. So let's expand it, give her some time, see what she can do, and then if they want to go for a nationwide search. But let's not throw her give her just a little time. What can she do in the short time that she's there?
Well, that's the entire thing with an interim superintendent. They're supposed to keep the ship afloat.
Yeah,
And it's the board's duty to go out there and
Oh,
look
they have
for
to.
replacements. They have to.
They
And
have to.
they need to look at a
Don't
bunch of
people
different
that-
candidates and everything like that, so.
Yeah, when do you have to file the bond initiative?
June.
So
I
she's
believe.
got to write it. You're not gonna have a new, you're not gonna have a new superintendent by June.
no.
She's gonna have to write the budget for this year, and she's gonna have to be the signer on the bond.
Danny O'Brien will get the budget. Once it comes down, they'll, from the state, how much we're getting. from the
Yeah, I
federal.
understand all that happens,
And-
but the superintendent's thumb is on this. And she's gonna be the superintendent during the period the budget is going through for approval. She's gonna be the superintendent during the period that if we're gonna seek a bond, she's gotta sign it. She's gonna be the signer,
Yeah,
right? There's not gonna be anybody else, so it doesn't make any difference what happens after June. She's the only captain of this ship we've got from now through the time that the budget has to be adopted and the bond initiative has to be filed. So, I mean, that's all really interesting stuff. Is she gonna be here in September? I don't know. Somebody
No.
new gonna be here? I don't know. But it doesn't make any difference to this conversation.
No.
She is the only person who is gonna be guiding this district from now through the time that this bond has to be filed. If we're gonna seek that funding, she's it. So whether we like her or not,
Yep.
she's it, man. Okay?
And then the question comes down, what do we do? I mean, I'm 95% positive we're gonna get a bond. We're gonna have the bond on the ballot.
Oh, yeah.
oh, yeah.
Has to be.
And we're going to have more conversations. I went around to all the 7 schools in the rebuild, took pictures, got intimate with the schools at times like that, and I understand them now more than insanely people should. But with what was seen and what I'm going to be putting out there with different PTOs, PTAs, PTSOs, the Scottsdale Parent Council, and the district, we're going to get the community educated to why we need the bond. It's not, and by the way, the first recommendation of the BRAC committee, get rid of the resize nomenclature. Make
Yes,
sure
please.
we didn't make a mistake when the schools went together. They were K-8s. We've had grades stripped out of there. They're 60-year-old facilities. It's not a resize, it is a rebuild.
And
Plain
mistake.
and simple rebuild
Put that
for our
over
kids,
there.
for our
We
future.
got a lot of work to do to sell it to the people, because I tell you, in the area that I'm in right now, you ain't gonna get a bond. There ain't no way.
If we had an election today, I promise you, we would vote the bond down.
With the political nature of what we're
Yeah,
dealing with, we're not gonna get
definitely.
it.
Go down.
Yeah,
But-
so there's a lot of work.
We've got to get out and educate the people of why we need that school, these schools rebuilt. Not just because we need to rebuild the school. Why? What's the matter with that school? But they don't know the electrical, the plumbing, this, that.
Technology.
They don't understand that. That's what we have to sell to people.
It's right here.
Yep.
This is it's not technology, this is the pictures from the schools.
Oh.
I took over 2,000 pictures
Yes.
of the schools. This is what is going to make a difference in the communities when they open up their eyes. There, and especially areas like Kiva and Hopi and Navajo, when those people see that this is what their kids are actually doing, because how many of the parents actually step foot on campus?
Very few.
And my problem was, I didn't even do this, when I walked on different campuses, how many looked up? How many looked to the right, to the left? You're looking at the kids and the teachers. Look at the wall, look at the roof, look at the plumbing, look at those things, and that's all here for people to see.
Well, I'm going to say this here, and I'm not that, don't get me wrong, I don't want to bash anybody. But Danny Brown did not help us at all in Tonalea, ever. Because you had people that say, well, geez, if they can use that for a community center and do this and do that and do that, why couldn't we have a school there? Because people, you had to have a plumber almost living on campus.
Yes.
The electrical burned out at coming in. You couldn't even get parts for it anymore. They had a jury rate.
The asbestos tiles falling down
You
the
didn't
rails.
have heat but they don't understand that. All they can see is Danny Brown was going to have this thing here, and that's what we're fighting right now.
I don't know where the bond issue, I mean, the execution of the bond issue will actually happen, but one of the things that I've seen also is this dreadful tendency to try to consolidate schools into ever bigger environments. I mean, in the military, you never put, fighting teams into larger units and they can know.
250.
Yeah. So, why do we expect kids to feel at home when there's 3,000 others of them that they
Let's
don't know?
go to that.
The
Let's talk exactly
recommendation-
about that.
The recommendation.
Because our real limitation on what we can operate, what building we can operate,
Yeah.
is how much money we're provided to run those buildings,
Right.
right? So when we get to that question, and we look at what it takes to staff one of those schools, and that's the operating cost.
But
The real operating cost is the staff outside of the classroom, okay? I mean, is there electricity, is there insurance? Of course there is. But it doesn't make any difference how big that school is. If you look at the classroom, the non-classroom staff. The biggest schools, 13 and 18. The smallest schools, 13, 12, 14, 11, 15. That staff is no different. So we have a similar number of buses. The buses don't go up and down based on the size of the enrollment. They're based on geography, how much territory is being covered. So we have these fixed costs associated with staff and with bus and turning on the power, operating the building. And I know we could make those things more efficient, but if we don't have a certain number of students in each one of those classes, those buildings, then our overhead costs become so large that we don't have enough to spend on our teachers, which is already a pathetic number.
given the budget that is presumed to be applicable to education.
Yeah,
If it's this big, you've got to operate within it,
yeah,
and therefore your fixed cost, then if it's a small school, fixed cost. If it's a very inefficient building and takes a lot of maintenance and it's going to overwhelm the
Yeah.
budget, that presumes that the budgets for education per student are good enough.
no, they're not. We're not gonna change that in this room either. The other dynamic that we have to recognize is that while we're looking today at, come on, again. Okay, here we go. We're looking today, this is just the K-8. We've got about 10,600 kids in those programs today.
Yeah.
Okay?
Your numbers are off.
Not my numbers, they're the district's numbers.
The
So
district,
don't tell me
I know,
they're
and
off.
that's one
Tell
of
me
the
the
matters.
district's numbers are off, because
No,
they're not
I-
my numbers.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, I'm looking at the one school that I'm most known with is Hoboken.
Then
We have 510.
Talk to Dale Brown, or talk to
Oh, no,
Dale
no.
Holmes, that's his number.
Those numbers have been
See that
changed.
says enrollment per Sean Holmes?
Right.
Okay, I don't have the October 1 data, when I've got it, I'll put it in there.
So I'm just saying, if you're gonna base it off the 10,600, I understand it comes from the district, but also understand that the numbers are wrong. They don't include
Well,
special.
Every time we get into one of these conversations, I always hear the numbers are wrong. But that's the data that's available. Now, let's say there's a 10,600, let's say there's 12,000. It doesn't change the fact that we have two big charter expansions coming up this year. They're gonna jerk another 700 to 1,000 kids out of our programs.
Yep.
I don't know how many are gonna go, but when you put a building the size of the expanded basis campuses in play, and the expanded Scottsdale Academy campus in play, and I don't know how many desks are really going in those buildings, only they do. We're going to lose some more of those kids, and then we're gonna lose more of our operating revenue.
Right,
Okay.
but the fixed cost will stay.
And if we're gonna keep all those schools, and if we're gonna have 13 staff members per school, then we rapidly are consuming the funding that is available to spend in our classroom. So we would love to go in and build every one of those schools over again. You know, if it was a function of just what's the best for the community, what's the best for the kids, what's the best for the teacher, you build every one of them over again. And you do fabulous stuff. But we have this horrendously harsh funding mechanism in our state that we're not going to get changed in the
No, not
immediate
unless I
future.
drop a bomb on the legislature when they're in full.
So how are we going to make our campus network be financially sustainable? How are we going to put a decent career path in front of a teacher and say you really should take this job for some reason other than the fact that you're just a saint? You just really, really love kids. Because no sane human being would go get a master's degree and work for $38,000 a year. You just would not do it.
No, I mean, there's plenty of work we're doing with teachers who fall into the literally low end of the affordable housing category.
Yeah.
And they're teaching science in high school. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, if you are a single teacher, family of four, in the early part of your career in Scottsdale, you're entitled to free lunch.
Right.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense? No. Yeah, and so why do we have a hard time keeping high quality people in our classrooms? Why do we have so much turnover? Why?
That's also an Arizona question in general, too.
Exactly.
The latest study that came out saying with 18% of the high graduates are retained,
Yeah.
that's a huge problem coming up for the entire state.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, there's,
So
Working on the school
recognizing
issues.
that horrible funding mechanism, how are we going to create a network of fixed facilities, storefronts, that we can somehow make financially sustainable?
Well, and it doesn't help when you got a governor that's more than willing to let people now, and pushing to let people give their school tax money to charters.
I can't do anything about the governor right now, but I want to know what your kids can have. And I'm willing to dream big, I'm willing to fight. And I'm delighted that the teachers have so much clout with rep, because that's not been that way in the past. Thus, we have some of the buildings we have. Anyway, the possibilities are important.
But I think from a, shall we say, grassroots, more than informed grassroots perspective, yes, we need to solve the problem collectively of how to deal with this dreadful financial dynamic that exists. But we also have a state legislature that's desperately trying to attract business into the state and not realizing that you actually need good schools and good education in order to attract those corporations.
But no, but the state legislature wants charters because they're a business and they want business to be in the business of schools. Public education is not looked on as anything profitable because it's not a business.
Right.
And it's also something that their buddies can't get their fingers into. So if you take away public education, you put in charter education or private education, their buddies getting rich, the kids get educated, everybody's happy over there. But you got Juan Estevez over here who can't afford to go and do the things with a charter that other kids can't do, and you're screwed. So there's a fundamental dynamic shift that needs to happen in Arizona for things to be right. When we're ranked 49th and 50th out of the nation for funding, for pretty much everything, that needs to change. But that's a political change also.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Huge political change.
That's not something that we can certainly solve. And there's also, again, something else we can solve is that the more dollars you take away from K through 5 education, the more certain you are to have a stream of revenue-generating prisons going into the for-profit jails.
But we're all singing to the choir here.
I know.
We're-
So we can't
Pretty much
agree.
Unfortunately, we're the minority in this state, okay?
Well,
Because
so?
we didn't go vote and we didn't get those guys out of here, so we've got John Kavanaugh putting more prisons in.
I know. But
And he's out, he's right out of my district. I take personal responsibility for the fact that guy's in office, okay? I accept the blame. We didn't work hard enough to get him out, and quite frankly, I don't know if you ever can.
Right.
I think we are stuck
You
with.
can. He can be pushed out. There, if you, the right.
You gotta look at
person comes
you
along
gotta
and-
look at the demographics in my district.
Who's that?
LD 23. It's Fountain Hills. You look at the LD 23 voting group.
Kavanaugh?
Kavanaugh.
Oh, yeah. Valley Interfaith Project has been,
Well, anyway, we're getting way off topic. Let's
Yeah.
go back to this equation. And if you expand to look at the whole marketplace, if you look at the number of kids that are going to school in Scottsdale, there's about 35,000 kids, ballpark. I don't know if anybody's really got that number, but roughly 35,000 kids are going, and roughly 2/3 of those kids are currently in our public schools. But that number has been dropping, and it erodes a little bit every year until a big campus goes in place, then it drops in a big block, and then it erodes a little more and it drops in a big block. And we go back to peak enrollment. Somebody remember what it was? 206?
Yeah, 206, 207.
Yes.
Was that the peak?
Yeah.
Okay, and the number was like 26,000, 27,000 kids.
27,000, I think 532.
Yeah, okay, good. But so we're building schools into a declining share of the market. And as we're doing that, then we're also committing to that staff that goes with those schools, unless there's a different way to operate the schools. So do we commit to put all those schools back into operation, knowing we've got a shrinking market and what it does to our teacher pay? Do we put the schools in place and put a McDonald's franchise in the corner of each of them, make them a revenue, et cetera? I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do, but that facility, every one of those facilities is going to require a lot of cost outside of the classroom.
Right.
And then what do we have left for the classroom? What do we have left for a teacher? And how do we, and that's what I was hoping I would hear here. How do we turn, if we're going to say, pick a school with just lousy square feet per student.
Just, well, we got a second here.
Okay, there we go. Let's say we're going to go, and Navajo is one of the big dollar amounts we're talking about rebuilding, right?
Which one?
Yeah, well,
Now it was a big dollar amount because of the asbestos removal.
Okay, so right now we got 232 square foot per kid at Navajo, and we're gonna spend 10, 15 million for that school, right? And you go down to the more efficiently used campuses, they're in the 150, 75 to 150 range. Poor Hopi's just stuffed with rafters. But if we're going to build a campus like that, just reducing the size of the campus, it's not a big building, it's just got inadequate enrollment for the building. So if we're going to rebuild the building, how do you bring revenue back into the building? You're going to do it through, are we going to hope that students all come back? I don't think that's a good idea. Are there alternative revenue sources?
Hoping is not necessarily the action point. But that's one of the reasons why we're in here. Are we going to build a school under the philosophy that we built them before? How are we going to look at this school? And that's where we have had the big problem. As we were looking at all of those things, and I sent Phil the PowerPoint and everything that, I was calling the wrong thing, AD who?
Oh, ADM.
Okay, I sent him that, and I sent him some of the questions that were answered. Because at every session, people kept saying, well, but it's the programs. If we had the programs, we'd have the interest from the community in having our kids in those schools.
But in the schools where you've got basically an oversubscription of space because you don't have enough students holding it up, the one organization that I know about that is desperate for space and is looking for space are the community colleges. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we were meeting with Jan Geller at Scottsdale Community College, and they're going to be busting at the seams because more students are choosing to take the first 2 years or so with community college rather than take a mortgage out and go to ASU. So the need for space is there, and they're also thinking not my campus, they're thinking where can we do this anywhere? And there may be, I don't know how this works organizationally, but there may be ways of connecting the K through 12 system with the community college system as far as use of capacity.
We used to do that.
What about reaching out to private enterprise?
Yeah.
And I'll just use one example because it's near and dear to my heart. My little girls want to dance. The dance studio where they train had to move. Lost their lease, had to go move. Shopped all over the Scottsdale Air Park, down the industrial park. Finally found some space, jammed the kids into it, found out what they were paying. My God, that's a horrendous amount of money. It's a ridiculously large amount of money. And we went back and I asked the question, why did we not approach the school district? Because they have much better facilities than the places, you get little cramped hallways, we don't have any place for the kids to change clothes.
Right.
So they're going in and turn their heads while they all change clothes in their rooms. I mean, it's just a ridiculous center. Why are we not using the schools? They said, well, we approached the schools, we were turned away, we were told we can't do it.
Oh,
You push it.
Why?
You could
I
even.
can tell you why.
Why? Why couldn't they do
That's
that?
another-
Why would the schools turn away that source of revenue?
In 1998, we were investigated by the Attorney General's office,
Right?
and we were found to be in violation of state code for contracting procurements. Since that time, any contract that comes in, unless it's got an attorney attached to it, they don't do anything. They will not accept it. We were fined we had $11 million in violations, all because of contracts. And of course, they would be back.
So that's why we're turning
They're
away.
scared to death, yes, they're scared to death to do that. Now, the attorney for the school district, Michelle Marshall.
Yeah.
Okay, Michelle Marshall, she is not an advisor to our school board. She cannot advise them. She is only there to advise the superintendent. There has been no change in how contracts are dealt with since 2006, 2007.
If we just opened up our
They're
physical,
scared.
our PE, physical education facilities to the community,
Right.
and said, we'll lease these
Yeah.
to qualify. You know, we certainly don't want to turn it into a magnet for pedophiles or something ridiculous like that.
That's also one of the big worries, having the people on your campus that aren't background checked, that aren't.
Yeah.
You have access to a kindergartner. I mean, you've got the 12th grade kids coming.
Yeah, but I'm talking about
advanced
after
unit.
hours. I'm talking about after school programs,
Right,
right?
but there's still after school programs that go on in the different schools. I know at Ho-Ho, we've got the City of Scottsdale program coming in. If there was a dance troupe over there, they could come in and do stuff, but then you're also talking different age kids around different people in the business.
So you're saying we can't bring other revenues into the facilities? Or we're not going to get enough revenue from students?
If there was a way to separate them to where the dance troupe over here wouldn't have any interaction with any of the school kids over here,
It can be done.
But
So is there a way to design?
yeah,
it?
there is a way, but the schools are not set up to do that right now. The
No,
schools
but
have no mind of doing
How
that.
did we do that for tomorrow?
And that's what we were talking about in the BRAC committee. How can we make those community-friendly areas? How can we invite the public to come in? And if people want to rent space, how do we have revenue-generating places?
There's got to be a way of taking one of those campuses, that big one with the big amount of square footage per student, and you could almost separate it off. It's almost like a commercial office building, where you have one tenant not polluting another one. It may in fact be separate entrance, separate whole area. And I mean, you not only can you, I mean, there are organizations that are looking for, smart manufacturing and prototyping, which doesn't involve a steel rolling mill, 3D printing, all that kind of stuff, software houses, those kind of things. I mean, it is possible to actually reconfigure the layout of a building so that you can kind of literally separate one off, and just say, okay, well now this one's got a separate entrance. It's entirely separate. It just happens to be attached to a school.
Well, isn't that actually how they do a lot of the schools out here? Because I'm from Massachusetts, so all of it was all under one roof.
Where in us?
I don't know.
Salem.
So everything was like all under one roof, we were all
Right.
together. And even then, we cut off one of the ends and made that for something completely different. We had brought kindergartners over into our high school, and we had just shut down that one door, and the kids would come in and out through the other way. Never had anything to do with
That's
any of
something
the
we
high school
used to
kids.
do here.
But out here, a lot of these, there's different buildings. I mean, they're not even necessarily always connected.
With that type of
So
a
that
campus
would be a
layout,
problem.
with that type of a campus layout, you would think that you would be able to isolate portions of the buildings. I look at this facility,
Do me a favor, can you bring up Hoboken?
sure.
And that's one of the largest footprints in the southern areas. It's also the rebuild areas we're talking about. City of Scottsdale wanted that land. They also wanted Pima
Yep.
really bad. And the problem being, if you zoom in on here,
Is that good?
here's our cafeteria.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our cafeteria right there. Here's our office. Kindergarten and specials, first grade, second grade and specials, third grade. This area here is language learning. There's maybe a room or two that is spread out here. My robotics room is right here, which I share with a language teacher. This is fourth grade, this is fifth grade, library and such like that. This is a huge campus. It takes you a while to walk from one end to the other. You also have your music building out here, then massive field out here. You could take this building right here. Yeah, massive field right there. You could take this building right here, which is our room 12, which we use for voting. It's also where our facilities coordinator is located in here, and then their fifth grade classrooms here. You could move them around a little bit, compact down, separate this, but then you have to build the fences out to here, and you have to build the fences around to make sure it's safe. And then figuring out how the kids are gonna work logistically. Logistically, on the older schools, it's hard to do those things, to move those systems around. This is one of the best layouts I've seen. You have your open courtyards. You have your areas where your second graders can be out here. And then your kindergarten kids can come out and they can read together. Your third graders can go out into here and then do different things. And you can have some separation so there's not a distraction.
You can tell me you got windows in your classrooms too?
Kinda, yeah.
There are windows.
You guys got
But-
all that stuff.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, they're up here.
It was built
We have windows.
built in the
we have doors.
50s.
We have, in the kindergarten area, we removed the wall, so you've got big, huge classrooms to put together like that. Kids down here in third grade where my daughter is, tiny classrooms, you can barely walk around. I have trouble walking through those areas at times, but I'm also a little bit larger stature. The problem is, you need a lot of these buildings operational because of the other services that go along with it. When you're looking at the numbers for the state saying, this school's at 50% capacity,
Where is,
Number 11.
yeah, there you go. Holcomb's got 190 feet per student.
but that also includes your cafeteria room, that includes your mechanical
It's true of
rooms.
every school.
Every school is that way. These numbers from the state saying,
Those
you
are
have
numbers from the
190
state.
or 200.
Those are numbers from the state. That's square footage of each building from Scottsdale Unified's open
Yeah, but there
course.
are numbers in the state. And
Right.
Those are numbers from the state.
No, I know.
No, no, no.
I know.
Don't dismiss those and say, well, those are from the
No,
state.
no,
That's
no,
nonsense.
The thing
It's
is
not.
this, these numbers here are true. You have that, but they also include rooms like this. They also include rooms like the fire riser room. You're talking about your entire building footprint
Yeah.
in those numbers. For students, tell me how many classrooms are going to be in the fire riser room?
So
None.
look
How many
at
classes are
Holcomb.
going to be in the administration building? What's that?
Holcomb's got 77,000 feet, Cheyenne's got
Yep.
82,000. If we pull up the aerial of Cheyenne, it doesn't look a lot different.
Yeah.
But in about the same amount of space, we've stuffed almost 1,000 kids. We have one room, not much bigger than this room, that is available that doesn't have a full-time classroom in it, and that room is only available because it has substandard wiring and had to be shut down.
Holcomb used to have 1,000 kids also.
Okay,
Back
so
in the 50s
let's
and
go back.
60s.
So obviously, you don't need the whole building.
Right.
Okay? So if you were gonna build an 80,000 foot structure back there again tomorrow, and we were gonna renovate, what would you do if you only got that building if you found a way to put rental revenue generating space in there for use after hours? Otherwise, you don't get your building. If that was the end of the deal, how would you
I'll
redesign
tell
that
you,
building?
like we started out doing. At Hoboken, that building where you have that up there, that over to the right, that building.
Yep.
That used to be a home economics room and a wood shop room.
And we still have the stoves in there.
But
I know,
let's look at one more
probably.
thing before we start that conversation. I don't know if I wrecked it already.
You mean?
Oh, no, here it is.
But here's
So
the
we're
thing.
talking about spending $10,700,000
Here's the
on a
thing.
77,000 foot building. So we're talking about spending $150 per square
The other-
foot
Okay, just,
for this facility.
let me tell you what
Let
they
me
did.
just
with
throw this
Go
out there
ahead.
right now. For sustainability wise, the entire district, the admin, everybody, the BRAC committee was talking about, this school was built for 1,100 to 1,200 kids.
Yeah.
That is not going to happen, especially since it was K-8 now we're K-5.
Right.
We have an enrollment of around 500 right now. For the future, because everything does go in a cycle, you'll have more kids and less
Yeah.
kids, more kids, less kids.
Yeah.
This school should be rebuilt at 700 maximum.
Okay.
The other schools that are out there for rebuild, 700 maximum. And what I have seen, because when these let me backtrack a minute. The first bond that never passed for the elementary schools once the middle schools were done, I saw the plans for the school. The plans were to start building over here in the fields, put in your K-5, or your 5th grade area, your admin, put it up front in large parking lots. Then you drop these buildings through here. Then you build the rest of your school through here, and then you drop these buildings over here. Playgrounds over in this area, better parking over in here. I don't want to plug anything. But also community-oriented services in that area. So if you had another parking lot down in here, in an area you're not using, you would have a public access building in this area where you could rent out space. You could do things like that. You
They're not
could have
condominiums.
But sustainability-wise,
Just-
500 to 700 is what they're looking at for that. Kiva's a little bit different because they already have more than that, but they're going to be upsizing because that's an area that they want to put more into there.
But here's the thing, after school hours, that campus, the home ec room, Maricopa County Extension Service ran programs for parents and others in the community to have cooking classes, sewing classes, art classes. We were using it. They paid to use it.
Yep.
Where we had the woodworking and all of that, They ran classes out of there. We had private business. When I first came here, the only buildings we had on the Hoboken campus in 1960, because they opened the school before it was ready,
Yeah.
that woodworking building. The next one down, over towards the center.
Like
No,
these were
go
gone
up.
or something like that.
No, those, okay.
Sorry, I remember these were the last ones built. Or these two were the last ones built.
How many acres are up there, Mike?
Okay.
Any idea?
What's that?
Do you know how many acres that is?
No, I don't.
That building, that building, that building, and this building were the only buildings there.
Yeah.
And we were running probably 40, 45 kids per class. It was awful. Okay. The campus has been reconfigured. If I am not mistaken, this is now the media center.
Yep, the library.
And
Yep.
thank you for changing the artwork on the front of the building. 'Cause they graffitied it. And this was all classes, there were some classes on this side of that building, and then there were classes in here. We only had this building for administrative services, the janitor and everybody else, and a nurse. Now, you can bring programs in after hours for those areas. It's been successful before, and nobody's going to jump up and down and go crazy. We just screwed it up. One time, big time, and then in 2 years we screwed it up again. So the AG came back and said, you're going to have to pay another $182,000 in fines, and we're going to put you on probation.
Yeah.
Quick question, is Hoboken one of the ones that's up for
Yes.
rebuild?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and its campus is all of this?
Yes.
That's
So you could start the rebuild here
Easily.
and phase transfer, so you,
Very much so.
you know, you could easily do that.
Oh, easily.
And you change the construction so that it becomes,
Same thing could have
Much
been done
more
at Tomalia, because their
Easily.
campus is big enough.
Yep.
okay.
Well, in a lot of the campuses I went to in the 70s had areas where you could do that. You could start construction over here, not have a disruption. This area wouldn't be used anymore.
Right.
So your recesses would be down through here. Your
It's
kids-
essentially what the high schools do.
Yeah. And that's
It's
what
built over the top of them as
the thing, there are a couple different things.
26th dimension.
There are a couple different things that have really messed up after activities for schools. First one, most prominent, Sandy Hook. When you have people coming onto campus that can get on there that can hurt kids, nobody wants that. We good?
Yeah, but
The
just it's roughly
entire-
12 acres.
The
It's roughly
policies.
a 12-acre facility.
Yep, exactly.
Number
Does
two,
that sound right?
and I'm gonna go back, the internet has messed up schools because of the news that's out there. We've had pedophiles
Absolutely.
for generations before. I was almost abducted, long story, back in Mass, in Linfield, Mass, very prominent area. So you have your gates, you have your things going on here. And you separate the kids. You have your kindergartens on one side, you have your fifth graders on the other. You don't try to have them interact enough unless they're reading, observe, and everything. But if you have a rental space or a business front on a campus, you have to ensure that this guy over here doesn't come onto campus and say, hey kid, you look cute, let's go.
Yeah.
Listen,
So
and
those
don't-
things have to be addressed.
Do
Yeah.
not think that it is an anomaly that happens, because when my kids were there and I was PTA president, I was called by a teacher. We had a PTA room too. Anyway, I was called by a teacher to come in because there was a guy going through the coat racks that were outside the first and second grade rooms. I said,
Well, I get that, but I mean, let's be very straightforward.
Yeah.
What's the greatest place on earth to go be a pedophile? It's not that public school campus, because we actually do have a reasonably
Well,
decent sense of security.
it's better than it was.
It's the dance studio where my daughters go every night. Okay? That's where those kids are at risk. They're not at risk at our school. We've secured our campus at Cheyenne.
Yeah,
We've done a
but you
reasonably good
have-
job.
I don't
No
disagree.
campus is secure.
I-
I do the gate-to-gate policy here. I stand right here every morning letting kids onto campus. I do crossing, I do everything like that.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
know
do you think
some
it's worse than my dance studio? Come on.
No, these are, it's
Nobody
bad,
has any
but
idea
it's,
what comes
I'm just
out.
saying, the way that they put the security into these campuses,
Okay, but let's
you need like 15-foot high walls.
go back to the fact that campus for $12 million becomes a financial anchor for the M&O budget of this district. We don't have enough money to run it. Do we want it? Yeah, of course we do, but we can't. We don't have enough revenue to run every one of the campuses, given the current funding levels we have in this district.
Well,
What
that's,
is actually the biggest funding anchor that we have right now is Kiva.
yeah.
Kiva is worse than, and it's not a
Kiva
square
or-
footage size, it is your energy hog use at
Yeah.
Kiva.
Yeah.
Oh,
Kiva
yes.
is the one that is by far the financial anchor. So what they're doing right now is keeping the lights on, keeping the kids comfortable. They're not doing fixes on the buildings.
Except we're focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
The lights don't cost half of what this costs. When you look at the cost,
How many specials are in? These aren't classroom. Those aren't your teachers. You've got 3 to 4 teachers per grade. These are also your administrators. These are also the language teachers that come in and help kids. These are the cooks. These are the people that actually help run the school. So this is a commonality number across the board because well, with the exception of right there, but those are the people
I don't know
that
those
make
people
this school function.
I get it.
So
I
I
get it.
mean, if you want to talk about taking people out of there, these are an anchor to you, then you're losing services.
No, I'm not talking about taking people out. I'm telling you that at this ratio, up at this ratio, that staff is efficiently used. And the dollars that we're spending per student are relatively low. It's a sustainable business. Down here, that's a non-sustainable business.
Well, that's one of the
We
things.
can't continue to run that school with that type of staffing per student
I'm gonna.
and have enough money left over to hire teachers.
I will respectfully disagree with you on one thing. These aren't businesses. If we're talking,
Unless we start thinking that way, we're not gonna have schools.
but the
They
problem.
are businesses. Whether you like it or not, it's a business. We got shoved into a competitive marketplace when our state decided we should compete with charters.
Charters and privates are businesses. This is public education. These aren't businesses.
So we're gonna go, no, we're not a business. We run out of money. When we run out of money, we don't hire teachers.
In a business though,
Let
in a
me
business.
finish. If we're going to continue to operate schools that have those levels of staffing, and that's the burden, it's not the electricity. We can turn off the lights and cordon off the air conditioning, we can sort of cut that down. But we still have that staff. Whether we operate half the classrooms or all the classrooms, we have that staff. And we have the buses because the buses serve the geography, not the number of kids. So are we going to bring some more revenue into those campuses?
If we were a business, I'm going to interrupt you just quickly right here. If we were being a business, and I've run businesses, I've managed businesses, I've done multi-million-dollar businesses. If you have a business that's not making it, you increase prices, you reduce some inventory, you do different things to try to attract those people to come in to buy your services.
Yep.
In a school that is funded by our state,
Yep.
which Scottsdale is one of the only places that we actually, all our taxes go into the schools, and we have an excess right here. Scottsdale taxes pay for our schools in the funding setup, which is horrible, absolutely horrible. We can't increase our prices to bring more money in. We can change our programs in the schools to try to attract more people. And I agree on this. We need to have a fundamental change to bring more children in, to get more ADM, to get the better things that we need. But we have to do that not in a building standpoint, we have to do that in an educational standpoint, where we bring those programs in, and they're working on it, they're trying to get that done. We have to have a change. And I'm gonna say, Lori's doing great things at Tonawea, but something we have to change to get their numbers up, to make it more attractive to come in.
Yeah.
They need a new school. When we get
They
this
can't
passed,
stay where they are. That's
Yes,
when we
sir.
get this passed,
This
Tonawea
last
is
week,
the
we had
first one
to
to
take a
be
teacher out of
rebuilt.
their classroom in order to be able to have a book fair.
Yeah, I mean, we rebuilt
every
schools, we
every school
rebuilt
has
schools
to have
before,
some
and it
changes
didn't solve
on
the
it.
Right.
So
Show me a school
attracting-
that we rebuilt and the enrollment came back.
To
We
make,
have-
to
Show
make
me
it
what?
better, to make
We
it
have
better
to do that.
enrollment, given what we're in right now.
Middle
we
schools,
have to
high
have
schools.
What?
policy
The middle
changes
schools and high
to
schools.
affect
Well-
more butts in the classroom.
That, I will tell you right now, you cannot bring SUPI into the equation.
Well, no,
That's stupid.
no, here's the simple thing, Mike, bring
No,
up,
I'm just talking
Bring
about
up what?
yeah,
the location.
bring up
Oh, yeah,
Hovcom.
yeah, yeah.
Bring up the picture of Hovcom.
Okay.
Okay. Now, look at this right now. Peabody. It's gonna be very easy. And this is how you sell the bond. This is how you don't waste the time like Mr. Allsop.
Gathering.
Okay, you have these fields. You're gonna go and talk to a voter and say, with Mr. Allsop here, he's conducted with ABC company, everyone else, or, you know, whoever the district decides. Okay? We're gonna build our K-8 here, and we know it's gonna take, we're gonna cut this into an L, okay? That's way more space you'd need for OCOM for, like, say, 100 years. This section up here is gonna be fenced, cordoned off, security, whatever. I work for IBM. Believe me, right now this building here, I can set up where you can have 24/7 traffic and never see a kid. You wouldn't be able to get a kid with the budget I have now. I'll run the numbers, I know how to do it. Now, if you told a voter, this big chunk up here is now going to be a collaborative space where we have Scottsdale Community College, ASU, I don't care if you have basis there, someone's going to give us money for this. We're going to build this. This part here, someone else can build, if necessary. If not, we're going to put up our little prisons here, your little 4 little square walls, maybe some windows, and we're going to rent them out. And then you repeat this process at every other school. Every school becomes a revenue generating center. People
Multi-use
Yeah.
schools.
And that's exactly what we were talking about in the BRAC committee. Those are exactly the things.
Yeah, but you know what the problem is that you may know it, you may have told everyone at Holcomb, but to the voter who reads the Scottsdale Independent or anything else, the people really count. I'm not saying the people in Holcomb don't count, but when it comes to voting and actually getting the money, whether it's keeping this, you know, architecture saying we're doing whatever magic someone can think up of, it costs X number of dollars. If you say from X, we're getting Y in profit, that's all you need to say. People will say yes. Then you have the money for your programs and everything else. To assume that we just rebuilt this
No,
and programs that are coming in and we're just going to say, everyone, please hold on. We're going to be losing money because we're not a business. We'll close your school. And we'll close another one because you know what happens? We can't change the governor, you can't change the legislature, and you can't change the laws in time. So what you have to do, you're forced to do, which I think Mr. Allsop is trying to say, is that by reusing this, by having someone else get to it, your kids get the new school, maybe these rental spaces are new, maybe they're you know, they're just gonna get it. You can get money. Every single one of our schools, as they stand now, including Tom and Lee, that can be done. But no one says it. Not the board, not the superintendent, not the advertising people. No.
And that comes the fundamental shift that has to happen in the district. The way that it's perceived and the way that things happen, we need a change. We need to be able to say, this is what we're going to do. But unfortunately, I agree, it doesn't happen.
Well, here's where I see here's the timeline issue. And I want to tell you right now, I'm a guy that wants to see the schools rebuilt. I do. They need to be rebuilt. If we don't get them rebuilt in this election, I don't know if we'll ever get it done.
No,
Every year we lose voters because every year we lose enrollment, right?
yeah.
there
So
is a
our
problem.
traditional supporting voting base is going away. So if we don't pass the bond this year, it's going to get harder next year,
Okay,
right?
but here's where we're gonna run into problems. We're seeing a tiny slowdown in real estate across the board in the valley.
Yep.
And we have many apartment complexes that are being built in the southern part of Scottsdale. And they started out as claiming to be luxury apartments by a gym. We have some of them now looking at the requirement to address low and moderate income families.
Yeah,
They are going to be bringing children into this.
yeah.
Certainly, well, yeah. I know.
But Nancy, who's going to vote yes for the bond?
Oh, I'm totally there. I'm the lady who was 2014 ran an election. Trust
I
me.
mean, I'm just looking at the biggest voter base.
I know.
Don't think of these as students, think of these as a kid that's got a parent attached.
Absolutely.
Who votes, right? And just look at the in-district, because the out-of-district don't get a vote,
That's right.
all right? I promise you, those three schools are gonna vote no this year. There's not a chance on earth that those 3 voting areas are gonna vote yes.
I would agree with
I
you.
promise you,
Okay,
it'll be a 2-to-1 vote, no,
here's the
in
thing.
those schools.
If we go forward,
And you're not gonna convince them otherwise. You're not gonna go and say, you
I
just need to
understand the trust
understand.
factor.
They're gonna go, no, I understand this district.
The
This
trust-
district does the same thing over and over and over, but I'm not gonna vote.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this meeting today.
Yeah,
There are opportunities to do it better, to do it differently, to do it more responsibly,
Okay.
with accountability in there.
Okay.
Now, how do I convince a voter to do that?
and you've got 90 days to do it. That's my point.
That's right.
I'm getting to the point. The point is, you've got a bond you're gonna file by June.
I know,
And then you've got 5 months till the election.
I know.
You've got 90 days to come up with a plan that has a chance of selling, and I want it to sell.
I know.
And this plan, we're gonna rebuild them all, and well, no, we can't really bring any revenue in, we can't really reach across to retail, we can't reach across, we couldn't share what charters got because we hate charters. That plan will fail.
I
There's
understand.
not a chance on earth you're gonna pass that bond.
I understand, but we have to go forward with something.
So you need a better plan.
Let me
That's-
just.
There's gotta be a marketing plan that goes with an expenditure of $140 million, other than, gee, just trust us, because nobody trusts us.
That's what I said,
Wait, hold on one
you
second.
better get out and sell this to the general public.
Okay, before we talk about
Because
this,
you ain't gonna
do you
get.
have more of
Say
your
so.
presentation that you want to put out there for us?
Yeah.
Because we haven't gotten away from your presentation.
Here's what I would like to hear from you. If I said, this is a blank canvas, okay?
Yeah.
But you've got to create, how many kids are in that school right now, Mike?
500.
500. So right now, you've only got $4 million a year of revenue to support that campus. And you need 6 minimum. So you show me how you're gonna get $2 million of additional revenue every year out of that campus.
There are 2 things that come to mind. One is that designing whatever the new buildings are to be a lot longer
Yeah.
longer operational
Yeah.
lives and longer maintenance. One is possible. We have a tendency to throw the budget at a typical builder. They do the same thing with the same construction. In fact, if we built aircraft and cars and smartphones the way we build most school buildings, nothing much would work. There are better ways of doing it, and it doesn't break the bank. It's a myth that doing things differently is going to cost a lot more. You just have to be very picky about how you do it. So what you end up doing here can result in much, much lower office and maintenance overhead, long-term and short-term.
That's the little piece of the budget. That's not gonna do it. None of those campuses cost more than $300,000
Well, that's
a
just
year.
one part of what I was talking
Yeah.
about.
There's only $300,000 a year that's spent on any one of those campuses today. And Copper Ridge is the worst, by the way. So that piece is good, but we have,
But that's not all.
Yes,
I own that building. I own that campus. It's my school.
Yeah.
And I'm positive that Mike Norton's school is gonna lose money the way that's designed. So my challenge to you as my designer, my architect, is to find a multi-use facility, multi-use purpose for that 12 acres, and show me how you're gonna put buildings in there that can be used for private retail businesses.
If I can go back to what I was
How are you
saying.
gonna do that? How are you
There
gonna
are
do that?
several pieces to this. One is doing exactly what I said
Yeah.
about making whatever we end up building a hell of a lot more efficient. That's just one piece of it. The other part, can you bring it back up,
I'm trying to.
is
It doesn't
that
want to stand.
you, as we talked about before, you can phase what you need to rebuild here. And it would seem to me that there's a convenient break line somewhere where one or more of these facilities with some rehab potentially could be turned over to use by other organizations, be it a commercial, be it a school, another school district, a charter school, or even community college. Doesn't really matter.
But it does, what would the revenue opportunities be for those types of things? Anybody have an idea?
What revenue opportunities?
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about rental cost per square foot for commercial office space, for which good commercial office space, which is not just office as we find in lawyers, but office where there are workrooms, there are lots of organizations that are trying to find space that actually want to make stuff. And they can't find that. They're going over to Silicon Valley, they're going to Dallas, they're going to
Yes.
Austin to do that because there's nothing here. Yeah, please.
We have,
So anyway,
go ahead,
Zoom
go ahead.
far out, just I want to show something just quickly before we start talking, especially about my school here and space. McDowell Road,
Yeah.
right down through here, you're zoned a certain area for commercial business in that aspect. Where the school lies, this is all housing. This is all housing zone.
Well,
To get
zoning variance,
change variances to put in a commercial entity into here is going to be tough to do.
Yeah, but the schools can rent their property out today.
Yeah, the schools can. And what I would stay away from charters because they are competition for us. But doing Scottsdale Community College, which is there, ASU, which is down here, putting different wings like that, immensely so, yes.
Yes.
Because then you also have, if you have it, because we do the I-Teach program here through ASU, we have the student teachers in there. So if we had an ASU campus part on the school,
Yeah.
boom, huge.
And that's-
Or even Scottsdale Community College, Pima has Scottsdale Community College. And then another one over there with Tonalea, something like that, an educational facility that is not going to say, I've got faces here and Hohokum right here. Charters have that myth of going more, I'm gonna put my kid who lives here into basis, taking away the ADM for Hohokum. That is something that is suicide to rent out to a charter or
No, you
private
don't
school
wanna do
like
that.
that. You want to go to another educational facility, ASU or whoever.
Well, how much are, like you were saying, how much would they pay on average? You can even lowball.
$18 a square foot for commercial retail.
Yeah.
So
Office
half of the
space?
square footage.
Yeah, office space today is, yeah, you just, yeah.
When, in 2006, when I
It
took them
varies.
and walked away from all of this, we had the plan, and I have to give it to Mike, but we had the plan. I have to give it all of it. And we had worked with Dr. who's the head of the College of Education, Dr. Garcia, Eugene Garcia at the time. We worked with him. Dr. Crow gave us him and a crew, Dr. Gary Bitter and a few other people, at least 12 other professors, and we created that program so that when Skysong came to that corner of McDowell and Scottsdale Road, ASU would have a presence on each of those elementary school campuses and the high school. I don't know where it went.
Well, I can tell you one thing. If you notice when Mesa got its light rail going down Main Street, immediately ASU is setting up a campus in an old defunct car dealership there. That's going to happen. Why are they slowing down in Scottsdale? Because Scottsdale keeps stepping away from the table on public transit.
We had, 2-3 years ago, we had put together a plan with Valley Metro, and I don't know where it is, for bus rapid transit down Scottsdale Road, all the way to the northern border. And nobody wants to talk about it. They need to put all the options out on the table, and let's get started in this discussion.
So here's the
Wouldn't
combination.
another possibility, especially for like Tonalea, to like open up part of their area, obviously the one we're in now, but to like a WIC?
You could do any one of those programs in there. The WIC program could have a presence, we did that at Hoboken back in the late 90s or early 90s. We had all those services on campus, like they were going to have at that resource center at Tonalea, but they were at the local campus, and we were able to start it out. We had a food bank, we had a clothing bank, we had medical help, medical services there that came in, and if you had kids in the school, you automatically got those services, but if you were an older person in the school, you could come in after hours, and there would be a doctor who could check your blood pressure, check your hearing, check other things. But we had that because we had the multi-use of the campus.
So let's go back to Hoboken. I'll come back to this in a minute. Because this one,
Yeah,
There you go,
Fresh before it dies out.
we got an 80,000 foot building, Hoboken today, right? And we're gonna spend roughly 12 million to rebuild it. So, let's say we have that 80,000 foot building again. We're only using about 75% of it efficiency. So could we build Hoboken so that there were pods of buildings in a campus type environment, and we could carve out 20,000 feet that could be used today as flexible space and made available to suitable other purposes, okay? And if we could, and we got that $18 a foot, we got $360,000 a year, and we just bought 6 more teachers, right?
Yep.
What could you do with 6 more teachers at your school?
Foreign languages.
Sciences, math
Yep, science,
specialists,
math,
whatever your
yeah.
principal thought was the greatest program for your school, you would do it, okay? If you, and I mean it. I mean, I just give it to the principal, because every time I go to my site council meeting, I just sit and listen. Nobody has a better idea than our principal does in our school. We're idiots if we think we're gonna tell her something she doesn't already know, okay? This thing, that's gonna end up being a basis campus.
It's called a ranch.
Like it or not,
up there, yes.
that land reverts to DMV. If we don't build a high school on that in the next, I think it's 2 years, year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing is, that's about to turn into a pumpkin. And the
Yep.
second DMV gets their hands on that, they're gonna give it the basis.
Yep.
So if you think that not sharing that property with a charter is gonna stop the charter from going there, you're really wrong. You're instead gonna open that up, and the Phoenix Industrial Development Association will slap a $25 million bond on top of that, and there'll be another basis campus, and it'll be right next door to Copper Ridge.
I don't doubt.
Now, what do you think is gonna happen?
I don't doubt that.
That land, right there, is the campus that has to be built upon as a high school. That's the only thing we can use it for. There's not a chance in hell we're gonna build a high school there.
Well, but I mean, how many of those parents don't already have their kids on a waiting list for a basis anyway?
You know, and here's another question. How many of those parents up there have one kid at Copper Ridge and one kid at a charter? Because their kids are different, right? I got twins, identical twins, and my twins are not the same. They are very uniquely different in what they're good and bad at, right? And one of the two would actually fit okay in a charter, and the other one would just die. So I'm one of those parents that could end up with kids all over the district, right? If we had choices for how we educated our kids, and we could go put our kid either in the charter or in the public school, would that be a bad thing? Are we going to stop them anyway?
You're not going to stop charters, you're not going to stop private school. What we can do in the district level is figure out what the best programs are, working with the principal to attract kids into their.
In the Copper Ridge?
Away from.
Well,
That's
I
what,
feel like
for
they're
Copper
getting
Ridge,
just as good of education.
for Copper Ridge, that's a conversation we need to be having.
Yeah.
The conversation about making it better than a charter to bring the schools in, to bring the kids in there. And with the 7 schools on the rebuilds, the question is, how do we rebuild them in a way that's neighborhood friendly, size friendly, environmentally friendly, to attract more people to come in there too? Because down in our area, we have a lot of business coming into that area.
Yes, we do.
We have people traveling to State Farm. We have people traveling into Tempe. We have people traveling all around that place. So how do we get them to say, hey, I want to bring my kids to that school? They've got great programs and they've got good buildings. Because right now they take a tour of Hoboken, they walk up to the 5th grade area and they see the beam where they can stick their finger in the end of it,
Yep.
which is horrible.
For nights.
Or they go over to Navajo and into the music room and realize that their carpet needs to be replaced, but they can't do it because that takes away their entire that management budget for the school for the year to replace one carpet. How do we change those things? That is a nice layout to school with the pods and everything, with open space for the kids and everything right there.
It's too bad they can't see it. There's not a window in that campus.
But the question needs to come into.
This is the school my kids go to, and this is the school that my first kids in Scottsdale went to when it was Aztec. Okay? Now, that school's got 1,000 kids in it. It's about the same footprint as Hoboken, but it's got 1,000 kids in it. Okay? Different program, people want in it. If you have the right program, people will come, and it's a crappy building. It's a horrible building.
So the building doesn't matter.
And despite the fact it's a horrible building, the Cheyenne Traditional School parents are going to vote no on the bond right now. They don't care if that building gets rebuilt or not. They only care if there are a lot of teachers in there who are really passionate about teaching their kids.
Right.
And they'd rather forfeit the bond, which is hard to say because we don't have a gym, we don't have science labs, we don't have windows, and they're still ready to walk away from the bond right now.
I go
But
down
the bond
there.
also, but the bond does affect them too, because if they do, they will have their multi-use room, they will have different things going on for them. There is construction slated for them.
And they won't have any teachers because the other schools in the district won't have enough revenue to suck that school down too. And that's the way we look at it. If we rebuild every school in the district, the only thing it's gonna do is wreck Cheyenne. We won't have enough money to run Cheyenne, and we already don't.
Actually,
So as far as we care,
that's-
I'm telling you, I'm not telling you that you're gonna change anybody's mind. I am telling you, if you have an election in Cheyenne today, it'll be 2
That area's
votes
gonna
no.
vote no. I
We
understand
vote
that.
no, we'll just keep our crappy building and we'll keep our teacher budget.
but that's a misconception. You can actually start changing too in people and your friends that you talk
That's
to.
because I believe it.
But
I believe it too.
But the
I
thing
believe it
is,
is financial suicide to rebuild all these buildings today.
let me tell you something.
Unless we have an idea about how we're gonna bring revenue in,
That's exactly
It's
what that's
financial
one of the things
suicide.
I'm gonna say, but let me tell you this. There was a time in this school district when we couldn't pass bond or override.
right?
There was a time in this school district when we passed all of them, no matter what,
Yeah,
because we knew that eventually buildings wear out
Right.
and teachers get tired of making do.
right.
And parents eventually say, wait a minute, this looks like crap, my kid's here, it doesn't have all the things that they want. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Right.
I sat on the 2001 committee that determined where we were going to put schools. That was called the Total Community Process, and if you look it up, you'll find it. That whole committee couldn't come to agreement on how we were going to build schools in what was then called the Northeast 30, which is probably where it's up in that corner.
Yeah,
It was just go in, throw a school up, go in, throw a school up, go in, throw a school up. As soon as the school hit 300, build another school.
300?
And we were looking at optimum enrollment at 500 students.
For a K-5?
No, for K-8.
K-8? Okay.
Now, you got a situation here, and I understand what you're saying about Cheyenne. And I understand why those parents, you included, feel the way you do. Because we screwed you up back in 2001 with what we were deciding to do with our school, by building schools and increasing enrollment.
So again,
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, these parents who think it's okay for their students to operate in crappy environments, would they actually, presumably, they're that immune to the idea that the places their students, their kids are in, or they, doesn't matter. That's true, right?
No, we believe it matters.
Well then,
But it's not.
but it doesn't matter.
It's
when it
not,
comes
it's
to-
not the top priority. What we believe matters the most is the quality of our teachers and their dedication and the buy-in of the parents.
That's only a partial,
Yeah.
that's only a partial view of a full educational program that's successful for the children.
And I wish that we could buy into the whole thing, but our state doesn't give us enough money.
But here's the, and
I
that's,
understand about that, but
So-
in terms of
Gotta sell it.
where the parents are though, if the parents have this viewpoint that it really doesn't matter as long as the teachers work, the teachers are also hamstrung in terms of what they can do by the crappy environment they have to operate in.
Mhm.
So, and there's not just me saying,
No,
there's
it's fact.
huge bodies of research about
My
it.
husband was a teacher, I know that.
So, I guess in 90 days, you don't have much time to actually educate people, but the idea that some have.
I want to see,
Well, let's wait a minute, let him finish what he's saying.
I'm just saying, if there's 90 days to go, there's not much time to actually convince a body of parents that something other than.
There's 90 days until they have to submit the paperwork for the bond.
Right.
And then we've got door to door.
Then we have more time after that to convince voters what's going
Yep.
on. One of the things that like, with the schools we're talking about, Hohokam and Tonalea, that were built K-8, they're not gonna be that size anymore. So just say if this was that building, or we zoom out on it, and take away, if this was the footprint for the building, that's what the new building will be. So you're talking about a more energy efficient building,
Right.
a more sustainable building, the same amount of kids going into it, smaller footprint. It will actually cost less for operations in the district, which will give the district more.
Money
Like
to
Kiva.
pay for teachers.
Kiva being redone, they've got an air conditioner per every classroom. They pump so much energy and so much money down the drain at that one school. When it gets rebuilt, it's going to be more energy efficient, it's going to take less of the headache away from the district, which gives us more teachers, which puts more teachers in Cheyenne, and Hopi, and Kiva, and Navajo, and
But
Tonalea.
it also is increasing your students' education.
Correct.
Because it's not just the teachers.
Correct.
If you put them in a room like this, then their learning ability goes down. So by having great teachers, instead of giving your student or your child 100% education, you're willing to do like 70, 50 or 75% because they're good teachers. Why not give them the building too, so they can have 100%?
All right, we're trying to tell the marketplace to change its mind,
Yep.
okay? Here's the competition. That's Great Hearts Archway Academy. You know what that is?
It's a
It's an
warehouse.
industrial building. It's a gray shell warehouse that was converted into a school. It is the most depressing place on the face of the earth to walk in. But when you walk in, the hallways, I swear to God, the hallways are about this wide and they go 30 feet up to the ceiling. So you're walking down this, you're just walking
Why
through.
not give them?
And you feel like you're going to a prison, right?
Give them the
Okay.
building.
It's a charter.
It's a chart.
And it has a 7-year waiting list. That's the competition and that's the market.
But
So
let
you
me
say
tell you
parents
something.
shouldn't believe this. Parents should not ignore the fact that the environment has an effect on their education, and you're telling parents to change their mind, and you're gonna want to ask them to change their mind in 3 months?
What do they do differently? What do they do differently that attracts people in there? Is it, they're
It's certainly not the
things-
building.
I know, no, not the building.
Because I put my
I'm
girls
telling you
in
one
there
thing,
for
I'm telling you one
semester to
thing,
see what it's like.
you can walk
and they
into
hate
this, you can walk into this building and not find asbestos. They've remediated all that. Even though they've got
Right, you
crappy
could-
cubicles that would be like over at Chase Bank office buildings
It's-
for their teaching environment, but they
It's not
still
even that
have, you
good.
still have to change the district from A to Z on what they're teaching, and that will bring more people in. But,
See this little spot right here? That's for recess. That's the entirety of their PE facility.
may I use
They
your
actually
computer
do recess in the parking lot.
Let me tell you
And
something.
they have a 5-year waiting list to get in.
May I use your computer for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great Hearts-
Hopefully you got a USB.
that
Do you have a
Great Hearts
USB that's
campus
open?
Sure.
Is starting to see parents
Do this.
pulling their kids out and going,
But as soon as someone goes out, someone fills it. You
They've
know,
obviously bought into the
Well, I
idea.
mean,
Yeah.
in Lincoln,
They've
the
obviously
grass
bought
is
into the-
greener on the outside of the fence.
They've obviously bought into the political idea that public
Yes.
schools are bad and charter schools
Yeah.
are good. Therefore, no matter how crappy it is, I'm going to send my kids to the charter school, hence the 7-year wait. Simple.
I don't want to,
Very easy.
fumbling through your computer, just wanted to bring up that one, something you was.
I have a question though. My husband showed me some of the pictures of what the schools, like what you're thinking of, look like. And they kind of remind me of my elementary school, where it's all kind of like, it's kind of one space, is it? With like different areas here and here?
Which pictures are you referring to?
Which ones will you show me?
it was from ADM where they just took a little snippet of the schools. I think it was in Great Britain where you have, there is no traditional classroom. You have a big, open, and then you have this other open area. So you have like the 100 kids to the 4 teachers, that whole, just throw everyone into one big space instead of.
Yeah, but that's not a standard formula everywhere, for sure.
Yeah, because my thought is that I had a huge problem when I was in elementary school because there weren't any walls. We just had the movable ones.
Yeah.
I ADD, man, I could not pass a test for my life because I could not concentrate hearing other classrooms go.
Exactly, no, those are just examples, I'm sure, of people, trying to.
If we're going to talk about how do we pass this bond, one of the things that we're going to need to do is show these pictures. This is Hopi Kitchen. They've got one of the biggest enrollments around for elementary schools on the rebuild. There's a person standing behind those boxes there. She is roughly my size. She's the only one that can stand at that end. And they're serving 1,100 kids, 900 kids, whatever it is. There's 4 people operational in that time. These are the stories that need to go out to say, you know what?
We can do better.
We can do better. These buildings are 50, 60 years old.
Yes.
These buildings have massive, massive problems. Not because of anything we've done, but because of their age.
You know, and here's the response back. There's 1,000 kids in Hopi, rebuild it, makes sense, do it.
Yep.
Do it. Now show me why you're gonna rebuild the one that's got 300 kids in it.
Because bringing down the size of their footprint will save money on that. But 300 isn't going to be 300 anymore. Because you're talking like Tonawea has 300 and some odd kids.
It's got 400 right now.
400. You move them back to their 68th Street location, put that campus back there. You're going to have the kids coming back.
How many kids go to Navajo?
From there. What's that?
How many kids go to Navajo?
Navajo is sitting at 403 when I went through there just a little while ago.
Yeah, you see, but you know what the problem is with these pictures? I'm sorry, cutting you off.
No, go ahead.
What Mr. Allsop is trying to tell us is like, okay, what we're trying to do here is we're going to take older buildings, you perform magic or you divide it and you do all this other stuff and it's great. But you know what the issue is? Because charters have done what they've done, a charter is sort of like a McDonald's, okay? Mr. Allsop can say, send your kid to a charter. If you send 100 kids there, 75 of them are going to die horribly. You got pictures of sharks, snakes, whatever, okay? Do you think you're going to convince those parents to go to a different school? No, because I can show you pictures of the stuff they do in a McDonald's, and you're not going to make a difference in that.
That's why I don't eat there.
Well, the thing is, you know what, Mike? You're a minority.
I know.
What you're trying to preach to is like, look, kids need these better environments. They need this, this, and this. If you go to a parent or grandparent, this is like saying, don't eat at McDonald's, don't eat at fast food. We'll make it generic. Don't eat at a fast food restaurant, okay? I want you to eat at an AJ's, okay? Because I want you to go get this expensive food and do all this. And you know what? The parents are going to say, to me, it's cheaper for me to send my kids to the warehouse to buy the junk food. So all these pictures and stuff, you know, all this is like, oh wow, a bunch of old buildings. Wham. Because you know what? They don't care. That's the problem. The voting base could not care. Right now, you probably could include a kid in some horrible scene in every one of them, and you may budge, I would say maybe 0.5% of the people who vote, and there's your issue. The voters don't really care about this because they don't have time to meet with Mr. Allsop.
I agree with you. I mean,
yeah.
you're talking generations as being induced into believing that cheap and low tax and cheap sun are the good things to have.
Yep.
And anything above and beyond that we have to pull out of our pockets is bad.
Yep.
But we still are in 48th in the United States in educational ability, you know.
It's gone that way for decades, and no one has really cared. You know, Mike.
The two highest enrolled schools in the Scottsdale Unified School District, K-5K program, are Hopi and Cheyenne. And they're shitholes. I mean, pardon the term, they are both dumps. It has nothing to do with the building. And the schools that people are in line to get into, waiting to get in, are just stark gray boxes. So if we're saying we're going to change the attitude of the marketplace in 3 months, we're going to lose. You know, what we're hearing from people is, you got to show me a reason that school should be there, that it's sustainable, that it's not a drain on the city. And I look at the Hohokam footprint, and I think that the Hohokam footprint is a great one for saying, we're going to come forward with a plan for a property that can be used for more than one purpose. That we maximize the revenue producing property leasing activity, at one end of the property. You know, let's go by the corner where we don't have very good security anyway. Let's put the elementary school over here where we can secure it a little bit better. This should be, and I don't know how you do it. I'm not an architect. I'm just, in concept. You know, if we're going to maximize lease revenue here and we're going to maximize security here, and in between we got some blend of activities, how could we design that 12-acre piece again and use $12 million to rebuild it, so that when we got done with it, we're kicking out $360,000 of new cash flow. Maybe we're saving $100,000 of operating costs. I don't know. Is that reasonable?
But there's also another option that you're not talking about too. What if this chunk right here is no longer part of SUSD? This goes, maybe they build houses, maybe the city's got something to put some park. This reduces our costs to focus on the education part. There's a lot of different things that can go into that.
Maybe.
So, and also, when you're talking, you have your campus up here, so you're going to be reducing it to a 500 student campus or 700 student campus over here. You're taking away 400 student area in here, which goes into population, but also reduces the cost of putting them in their building. There's a lot of benefit to rebuilding the schools, which again puts some teachers at Cheyenne, which gives you the programs that you want throughout the district.
Yeah, but it's not going to change the overhead cost of it's not going to change the M&O impact.
It will, because you're bringing the size of the building down. You're not keeping that exact building in that way. You're bringing it down. There's still a fixed cost. Your janitors, your staff that goes into
I
that.
got a principal, an assistant principal, and everybody down to the janitors.
Right.
There's 13 of them.
You need so many people to operate the school.
And that's whether it's 400 kids or 1,000 kids.
Right. I understand that completely.
And
But when you're talking,
I have an average of 8 buses.
Yep.
That's the fixed assignment to that, but then that's not going to go away regardless of the size of that building.
correct, but your cost of running that school, the cost of lighting that school, your cost of cooling that
It's
school,
$100,000,
brings
I
it
agree.
down. And then if you lose part of that footprint, if the city would love to have that, then you're talking less expenditures to go into there, which means more
Sounds
space
to me
to
like
have.
developers are driving the rack.
Yes, they are.
Oh, yeah, no,
Well,
no, no, no,
buy
no,
land back and
no,
rebuild
no, no.
apartments on it?
Developers,
Yeah, that
no,
would be a
developers are
developer
not
dream.
driving the bracket.
See, if I'm going to run this thing for the efficiency of public
Okay,
schools,
that, hey,
Developers,
I understand where you're going, but it's after 4 o'clock, and the contract said 4 o'clock's fine.
Are we out here?
Okay. Yeah, but I want to say a couple of things. If you'd be willing to look at what we have been talking about in schools,
That is the purpose, and even though we've been talking a lot about the importance of built environments, we know that we're talking about at least 2 generations of people who've been brought up on the idea that cheap is the only way to go,
Yeah.
and that crappy environments are just okay. They're clearly not, but that's not going to be changed in 90 days or even possibly 5 years. It's going to take 1 or 2 examples that are commercially successful within the budget
Yes,
to do it.
yes.
okay.
All you need is 1 example of that.
But
That's what we're going to.
if somebody would just turn me loose with that property,
Yeah.
I'm positive I could turn that into a high revenue generating facility. It's a fabulous piece of property,
Yeah.
right? And I wouldn't sell that land off. I'd operate that land.
Mhm.
I would operate that, I would build the whole thing, I wouldn't build it to 80,000 feet, I'd build it to 100,000 feet. And I would put 40,000 foot of revenue producing square footage over here.
In the
And
middle
then
of
I would
residential
stuff that school building with the greatest teachers.
Welcome
I
to
could
the
find.
modern world.
And if I did that, if I had an environmentally friendly campus, a motivating environment for the kid, and I could put 5 or 6 more teachers in that program would light up and take off like a rocket,
Right.
right?
is the district
Well,
allowed
it would also
to give that
change-
space to retail or to
Yes.
industrial use? Are they allowed to sell it, to
Okay.
rent it out?
There it
There's
is.
a lot of questions, there's a lot of things going on there that need to be addressed before that plan that you have, which in your world, I understand that makes perfect sense. To sell that to, or to use that, not sorry to sell it, but to use
Generate
that
revenue.
to generate revenue, to put back into the school,
Yeah.
then are they allowed to do that?
Yes.
Are
Here's-
they, you know,
that-
I know they
that's-
can rent spaces out,
Yes,
but to have a commercial storefront right there,
No.
are they even allowed to do
No.
it zoning wise or anything?
No.
like that? You can do variances.
But you could rent
There's
space
a
to
lot of different
educational
things, there's a
institutions.
lot of different things
Say
to do.
again?
You could rent space to education.
yes.
If you're zoned for educational, yeah.
So-
Teacher training,
so you know where-
SCC there.
Absolutely.
You know where we go to our dance competitions
Yeah.
when we go? We go to Higley and Gilbert. And Higley and Gilbert are leasing their facilities out to dance competitions and sporting competitions. They're renting them out to the training programs. The dance theaters and the dance competitions are taking place at other campuses because Scottsdale's decided that it's not something that we can do. We
I
can't
go
do
to
it.
schools all the time with my robotics kids, and they're renting out those spaces to use.
Yep.
I understand, but that's a one little grab of the market there. What if you can't rent it out? What if your buildings sit there for years without being used? You have a problem there too. So there's a lot of things that have to go into it to say, let's go and do it.
I guarantee you, if I sat in this room for another 2 days, and we said we're going to design the best use for that property, we could generate a design plan. And I'm just looking at your thoughts and looking at the way you think. I'm positive we could put something on that property, stuff that property to the gills, and people be waiting for room to rent.
And you could do it in a very simple way that says, okay, phase 1 is this, phase 2 is this, phase 3 is this. It doesn't have to be done all in one.
Right, no, right.
Okay,
And that's-
Okay,
time, wait, I know you haven't had a chance to speak.
So-
It's after 4 o'clock, and I don't want to turn into a company. Now, do you feel this conversation has helped us understand where we are and where we need to go? Because this is a conversation that the community is going to have to hear.
This is the preaching to the choir room.
That's right.
Everybody here is pretty much in the same
But you
thing.
two have been
Right.
working
But-
things through here.
Different ideas, there's different ideas going on here. There's different realities that have to come into play. There's an entire different
Absolutely.
aspect that is not represented in this room to talk about,
Absolutely.
and that is the administration to the district to say, we
No.
want these programs. We
And
want Cheyenne to be
even
better.
these,
at
even these
everything.
ideas won't work in every single one of the schools.
Exactly, and that's the
Each one of
thing.
the schools
Oh, no,
gonna be
it's
looked
not.
at as its own.
So-
But that's one of the reasons why I wanted Phil to
Yeah.
do this, because
You guys don't need them.
open up, you've got to open up the thought process.
Yeah.
You know,
And,
one of the problems that happened with the middle school.
okay, do we want to do another
Is it
meeting
okay,
like
we're
this,
gonna build
maybe
middle
with a few more people?
I think
Open up
everyone
the
was the
thought
same.
process.
I think, in my personal view, with my experience with the administration, with the schools that I've seen, with what I've seen that's goes into the bond, these little group meetings are bashing ideas around our different thought processes. What needs to be done, and this is what BRAC recommended to the board. BRAC is not run by any business person, by the way. It's run by the administrators and the parents. I just want to clarify
Yeah.
that. There is nothing on there that was saying retail, or sell. But all options were on the table. What needs to be done is there needs to get out to the public, especially in the area of the 7 schools. This is why we want to rebuild. Through no fault of the district, these schools have gone downhill. The state hasn't given us money for these things. The political climate, whatever. This is the reality. And the reality is, if these guys don't get rebuilt, we're looking at closing them. And some very affluent areas, we're looking at closing them. And then it's going to creep north because those buildings aren't getting the budget to go back into it to keep them going. So they're going to start closing. And then it's going to hit up in the north. And all of a sudden, we're going to be looking at an area that's all basis. It's all charter. They come in and they buy the properties and they do this up. Scottsdale School District is gone
Okay, what-
because we are not keeping our kids and we're not able to keep the buildings
And
open.
my whole point is, we can do it better.
Thank you.
And that's what comes out of it.
Thank you.
You're probably your department.
Yes.
So we've emailed each other, right? Sure. Yes.
There needs to be a plan to go out to the general public to say, this is why. This is what a bond will do for us. This is what help it will come into. I got it. No.
I want, okay,
No one, yeah.
I don't understand all the things about architecture and business that you do. I'm an average, I'm a mom, I'm the stay-at-home mom, even though that's stay-at-home mom, but I'm the one who's staying home. I want to know if information like what Phil and Lauren have is good for us to try and relate to the community.
It is a piece of it.
Absolutely a piece of it. My whole thing is with my generation down there in the southern part of Scottsdale, You can convince them to vote for this bond, but you have to convince them that we can do it better. We can do it so that we're more responsible. And we can do it so that the longevity of that building is there. They're not going to accept chicken wire and stucco. They're going to expect a building that can be multi-use, and I don't think you'll find too many people who would object to that. They didn't object in 2006 when we put in, where we did the attempt to put in ASU, and I think those kind of things are definitely a possibility.
Yeah, you could do that. The thing is that you need to remember, you're trying to convert everyone over, it doesn't work in elevator speech. You need elevator speech to get voters. As you know, Mike will probably never switch over unless your elevator speech was, I'm rebuilding your school because we're gonna call it green. I know it's a horrible name for it, but you build a green school which has programs, you don't go any further in programs, but the school is gonna generate on average X amount of dollars. And you know what, you can get voters, you can get everything else.
Well, I'll tell you what would sell. Your elevator speech would be, our schools are gonna be green and they're gonna be black.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have red ink deficits, we're not gonna have red ink budgets. We are going to create a budget that is a black ink budget for every school.
That's,
Okay, and it's gonna have a teacher in it who's got a decent career path. Not a teacher who's a slave to a job or just can't wait to quit.
that's,
If we could deliver those three things, but you know, how?
okay.
I keep coming back to it.
That's the next step. And I didn't hold this meeting for myself.
Okay,
Because I know you've got information, and we've got information, and it's not coming together. Okay, I didn't know Brack presented this last week, but that's a whole other story, and that's no big deal. Here's the thing. I live in South Scottsdale. I went to Hohokam. I'm interested in the Tonalea area, having no school back. Okay, now, you can tell me you're gonna rebuild my school. And my thing to all of you is, how are you gonna do it? What are you gonna put in it? So that those kids, and my big interest is the kids, those kids today and those kids tomorrow are gonna get a quality education. We used to have it, we need to get it back. And I don't think it's not gonna happen if we just do it behind closed doors. These questions have to be asked.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there, obviously, in political circles who are happy with the idea that people don't care. And that everything is going to shift over to washing our hands of anything to do with education because the private sector can take care of it. That's like private sector fire departments in New York. You know, my house is on fire. Can you put it out? We'll pay me money first and we'll put the hose on it. That's not good.
Yeah.
We're kind of beyond that, I think.
Let me bring some focus to where we have the biggest problem with voter support. Let me just tell you really hard where our problem is, because I think you're right. I think we could get this out there. In the last 4 years, we have lost 1,252 students from just 5 of the northern schools. 1,252. It would be worse, except in the last 5 years, we brought back 513 students from out of district.
Here's the thing that drives me bonkers.
We've-
We asked that question at those 7 meetings.
We've lost the voting support in northern Scottsdale.
I know that.
They don't want to vote yes anymore.
And they
You know how
vote
hard it was
themselves.
to pass the override? You know how many people went out and just pounded door
I
to
know.
door?
Yeah.
You know, we had 10 and 12-year-old kids out pounding on doors. I don't know how many weekends in a row. And people were just shamed into voting yes. You know,
And
we
that's what
put
you have
little
to
kids
do.
in front of their door saying,
Absolutely, that's what you have to do.
and if you go back and look at the
It
voting
might take
district,
again.
we just barely
Barely.
tipped that northern region back to the point. The northern region would have sunk the override again.
I will tell you this.
All right, and now we're going to go out for a bond, and we're going to say, okay, we want a bond passed so that we can rebuild the schools. And so you're going to go to Copper Ridge, and you're going to say, I want to rebuild the Copper Ridge school, and the parents are going to go, my school's okay. I don't care.
No.
I don't care. The Cheyenne people are going
And you
to.
definitely
Cheyenne
have to
people
get
are
the
just
neighborhoods
ruthless.
and
I know.
Cheyenne people are going to say, bonds don't do anything good for us.
I
We're
totally
out.
understand that, but when you say you had 10 and 12-year-old kids going door to door and shaming people in it, well, you know what, that's what we gotta do.
Well, but they won't. I'm telling you, they won't do it.
One of the things that we also need to do is look at the area that we're looking for the bonds and how many people in those areas actually vote.
Yeah.
With the 7 schools on the rebuild, it is a very small voting block. And it's dominated by other issues there. But if we can reach out to these people in these neighborhoods saying, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to help, this is why, here's the kid that goes there. It's your kid, it's your grandkid, it's your nephew, it's your niece, it's whoever, it's your neighbor on the street. Those people that don't go and vote need to get off their asses and vote.
Yeah,
They
that's
need-
all.
and a lot of them don't understand.
Amen.
A lot of them don't understand.
We're not gonna
That
change that
school's falling
either.
apart.
No, you can't.
We got a certain number of voters, they show up every time, we're not gonna change that
No.
dramatically.
You
But
can't.
The voters we got are gonna have to be
You
convinced
can
that it's a good plan.
educate people. You can
There
educate
is-
people to say, hey, you know what, I
You
do want
can.
to go vote for it. You can, and it was done.
It's hard.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
really, really hard, but it can be done.
Yep.
Here's the thing. We haven't tried to educate voters in a long time. When I was part of PTA and part of parent council, I made a nuisance of myself because I said, tell people what the money is going to be used for in the classroom, and tell people what the money is going to be used for in administration, and tell them what's going to be involved in maintaining and operating that school. And we ultimately had the assistant superintendent, at the time was Glenn Turner, and Glenn Turner sat down and he put together a diagram. Maintenance operation, teachers' funds coming to them, programs. He showed us where the budget went. We haven't had anybody do that in a long time. Nobody has been able to show this community, or frankly, any other community, what has happened since the money has been deducted by the state legislature. Every time they take more money, we have a state school facilities board. It came into existence in the early 90s. The state school facilities board is no longer funded, has no money, has no clout, and yet they have administration. They can do nothing. Yeah, there's a big problem, but people don't know, and education is the biggest part of, I hate this because I'm good at it. Education is the biggest part of this changing attitude in Scottsdale in regard to education. It takes political clout, political will, and you can't get that unless you educate the people. And that's the sorry, sad gist of it all. And we've kept it longer, and I'm sorry.
Hey, I hope that whatever comments or thoughts we have with some of these, you know,
Yes.
you've been embroiled in this for quite some time, there's a lot to do. I'm under no, we're under no illusions about how hard it is to get to a point where the right thing can be done
Yeah.
for kids. It's a long journey for sure. And I know that the changing dynamics of Scottsdale, particularly North Scottsdale, where you've got increasing numbers of people who simply want cheap sun, low tax, nothing. That's all they care about. They seem to forget that actually as a species, our evolutionary capacity is actually based on collective action, not riding on your horse on your own. But that means, you know, and so I think, you know, the swimming uphill, the current going the opposite way, is one of, you know, celebrating ignorance and thinking that we don't have to invest anything in future generations because somehow it will all be fine. And it won't.
One of the reasons that I asked him to be here is because I know we're going to have to show we can do things differently, we can do it better. And we can be more accountable and responsible as we do it.
This document, if we had an opportunity to do things like this at Cheyenne, if we just raised that place
That's one of the reasons.
and,
He said they all
and said, let's go build this campus again to support what we do today, instead of having a 1 or 2 year waiting list at Cheyenne, you'd have a 10-year waiting list at Cheyenne.
Yes.
If we also brought in the other staff improvements that we talked to Dr. Birdwell about. We do, you know, today we don't have science. We say we have science. We don't have science, it's a joke. We don't have a gym, we don't have science. Our kids, our middle school kids,
Looking in there, see what's
we put them on a bus and send them to another school to go do their training for their sporting events.
Okay.
And we still have a waiting list to get in. It's the only school in North Scottsdale that hasn't lost massive amounts of enrollment.
Mike?
So what are we telling ourselves?
Okay, as we go on in this, one other point, I'm gonna call him and ask him to come back and talk to me about doing things differently, because he's got a wealth of knowledge, so does Lauren, and this didn't cost us anything. Really